My name is Phil. I've got a theory. My theory is that every good story, whether on the cinema screen, on our televisions, in our books, on our radio, or wherever we see it, has a tiny little bit of the Bible in it. So what I'm doing in this series is I'm taking one well-known story from those places, exploring it, explaining it. Then I'm summarising the Bible in 2 minutes, comparing the two, and then coming up with an arbitrary score for what percentage in the Bible is in that story. And this episode, we are looking at Star Trek 2, 3 and 4, The Wrath of Khan, The Search for Spock and The Voyage Home. So let me give you a spoiler-laden summary of those three films. So it begins in Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan. Kirk and the crew of the Enterprise face an old enemy, Khan. Years earlier, Kirk had defeated him, but Khan has returned, seeking revenge, and we learn past mistakes and unresolved grudges are going to put the Enterprise and its crew in grave danger. Khan unleashes his vengeance. The crew is confronted with destruction, and in a desperate move to save the ship and his crewmates, Mr. Spock sacrifices himself, entering the reactor room, knowing that this is going to stop Khan's plan, but it's going to come at the cost of his own life. So he dies, and the film ends with the crew performing a solemn space burial. In Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, strange visions and signs reveal to Kirk and his officers that Spock may not be gone after all. The crew, guided by these mysterious messages, undertake a perilous mission to find him. With the Genesis device as a backdrop, a tool of new creation not devised by Kirk, Spock is miraculously restored to life. His return is unexpected beyond the crew's power, and he enjoys them for the final journey ahead. And then finally, in the final film, Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, Kirk, Spock and the crew work together to avert a global disaster threatening the Earth. Using ingenuity, courage and teamwork, they succeed, and the Enterprise and its crew return home to Starfleet, to where it all began, where they all came from in the first place. So that is a very brief overview summary of those three Star Trek films. What we've got now is a summary of the Bible in just over 2 minutes, which we're going to watch, and then I am going to see what parallels there are between the two. So Act 1 is called Fall because we start with a perfect world created by God, but because mankind decides they want to be in charge, they disobey God. That's the story of Adam and Eve, and it all falls down the toilet. Which takes us to Act 2, which is called Consequence, because of the fall, everything goes to pot. We live in a chaotic, fallen, dirty, messy world, and that's the consequence of that disobedience, what we call sin. But in amongst this consequence, God promises that someone is coming who's going to make it all right again. Act 3 is Sacrifice. God walks into this broken world in the man Jesus Christ, and he lives amongst the darkness, the chaos, the sin, and it takes its toll. He finds himself nailed to a cross, dying in this broken, fallen world. Has God finally succumbed to the effects of sin, or is something else happening? We'll find out in Act 4. Act 4 is called New Life, and you can tell from the title, of course, God doesn't succumb to the fall and to sin. What kind of story would that be? Jesus dies on the cross and he comes back to life again, proving that he is bigger than sin, bigger than the fall, bigger than the chaos and the darkness. And in coming back to new life, he extends an offer to all who follow him, that we may too look forward to being risen again from the fall. Which takes us to Act 5, Home, and the closing stages of the Bible. Through his death and resurrection, Jesus opens the way to living in a world that's a bit more like that pre-fall world. We see glimpses of it today in church at its best, but we will see it fully revealed when Jesus comes again, and there's a beautiful picture of what that looks like at the tail end of the book of Revelation. So, How much of the Bible is in Star Trek 2, 3 and 4? Well, let's go through those acts, shall we? Firstly, we'll take acts 1 and 2 together, fall and consequence, because I think they're both there together, because this whole arc of films has come about as a consequence of Kirk's previous battles with Khan and maybe some arrogance that he had at the time of their previous battles. And as a consequence of this history and Kirk's previous actions, the Enterprise now finds itself facing destruction at the hands of Khan. So I think we've got Act 1, tick, Act 2, tick, Act 3, sacrifice. Well, we've got that with Spock in the reactor room, haven't we? Spock walks straight into the danger and is willing to give up his life for his friends. New life. Do we have Act 4? Well, of course we do. We've got Spock coming back to life again. And then finally home, looking forward to a new way. Actually, the final film is called The Voyage Home. They're going back to Starfleet, going back to a world where the wrath of Khan can't affect them anymore. So there are some nuances. It's not exactly the Bible. Spock isn't God, and there's other things we could do to take apart from a biblical perspective those three Star Trek films. But ultimately, I think there's quite a high correlation there. So I'm going to give it quite a high arbitrary percentage of 85%. You've got most of the story there. Obviously, the Bible's the place to go to drill down deep and really work out what this means for how we live our lives. But if you want to enjoy a story of hope, new life, and a fall being undone, then those three Star Trek films are a good start to tee you up to really explore it in the Bible.